In this video, I'm going to go over the new resin STI key covers that I've been developing, and I'm going to refer to these as the version 2 covers. The version 1 covers were the ones that I made of ABS filament. I'll put a link to that video in the description in case someone wants to go back and watch it. But I'm going to compare and contrast the differences, go through the new process, and explain why I'm switching to resin covers. But to give a real quick recap, this is the 2004 Subaru WRX STI key, and it's a titanium key that a lot of people really want to use. But a year later, in 2005, Subaru switched to an immobilizer system, which used these 4D62 security chips. So you needed that chip in your key to start the car. If you tried to use this old key, it would start, but it would immediately shut off. And that's what I basically came up with a solution for. These are new plastic covers. You cut this plastic off. These covers have a hollow spot for that chip, and then you slide it on. And when you do all that, you'll end up with something like this. You get to use the titanium key. It's got the chip in it. You can start the car and drive it like normal. So let's start. I just want to show this up close. Let's start by looking at this OEM cover. And this is a brand new key that I just took out of the box. There's a part number, and it comes in this bag. And this is the plastic. And I don't think anyone has stared at a STI key as much as I have in the last 2 years, if not ever. But this plastic is injection molded. You can see it's got a seam right there. And there's a gap at the bottom. It overhangs the bottom edge a little. If you look at it here, it looks a little twisted. But this is the OEM plastic, and they don't fit that great from the factory. I just wanted to point that out. But it's been a struggle trying to develop these. I went through quite a few iterations to make something that would fit right. And just to kind of show you, this is the very first key cover that I ever printed. It's very crude. The slicer wanted to bulge out the sides. I had to go from the Cura slicer to the Prusa slicer. And this is kind of where I'm at now, the version 2, the resin covers. But you can see that we've came a long ways. So when I was making these with the ABS filament, I'd have to use my Creality printer, which is right over there. I'd have to use a heated enclosure. They would print an ABS, and this is a raw print off that printer. And this would take 35 minutes. And it was a lot of trial and error to get these dimensions right. And obviously, this can't be the final product. So I'd have to hand sand these to get them smooth. And then I'd have to use this little hanger that I made of some bent wire, and I'd have to dip it in acetone 4 or 5 times. And when it came out of the acetone, this is what it would look like. It would help smooth it. And it was trial and error because dipping it in acetone, while it does smooth it, it also eats away some of the material. So I'd have to put masking tape on the bottom because I didn't want it to eat away the material from the straight edge. And then I'd have to let it harden up after the dip. And then after a few hours, I could test fit it on one of my keys. And when I would test fit it, maybe about 4 out of 10 I was happy with. The other 6 out of 10, they didn't fit right, or they had a gap, or they wouldn't slide on all the way, or this corner right here, too much material came off it. And it was a painful process to spend 10 to 15 minutes sanding each one of these, only to have 6 of them not work. So it took a lot of time, and I threw a lot of them out, or I would take some of the minor defect ones and I would just throw them in for free to a package. So if people wanted to experiment on one, they could, or it was a cool display piece. So I leaned into resin printers just because I saw some stuff other people were making and the quality looked pretty good, but I didn't know a whole lot about them, and now I do. So a resin printer can make really smooth prints. They're very consistent, and it takes as much time to print a single one of these as it does to print 20 of them. So a resin printer works by using a vat, and I'll show you. I just gotta set my phone down to take this off. This blocks UV exposure. So let's pull that off. So this is the vat and you can see I've got the blue resin in there. And this platform will lower down into this vat, and on the bottom of it it's clear, and it sits on top of a UV screen. So this goes down to the very bottom, and then this UV screen will project light where it wants the resin to harden. So it'll project light for a few seconds, and then the platform will lift up, and then it'll go back down about 0.5 millimeter higher than it was before. And then the next layer will appear as an image on the screen, and that will harden, and it'll keep doing that until the entire part is printed. And then you'll have the parts hanging off the bottom of this build platform. So it's pretty slick the way it works. And because it does that entire layer at a time, it doesn't matter if you have one on there or if you have 10 on there, it takes the same amount of time. It's not like the old filament printers like this one, where you've got a tiny little nozzle on the bottom of this, and it's got to move around everywhere to make resin. So not resin, but to make the part. So it's a lot faster. I can do as many as I want, but I've been doing 16 at a time. But there are some drawbacks to the resin. One, it's really expensive. One of these bags is like $40, $50. Same with those containers. It's toxic. Like it doesn't smell the greatest. I need to put that cover back on, in fact. So let me do that right now. And you've got to keep that cover on because it blocks the UV light. If you don't, that resin would want to harden. So it's toxic. So you go through a lot of gloves, and you need to clean it up with isopropyl alcohol. And after the parts come off that and they're hardened, they're semi-hardened, you got to put them over into a wash station, which is what this is. And there's an agitator at the bottom that can clean the parts. So that'll clean the non-hardened resin that's kind of stuck to your resin part off. And then you got to put them into a cure station, which has UV light, which will fully harden them. So there's a few more steps. And then you'll end up with a product like this. And here's some other drawbacks to them. You can see these lines on it. I can scratch this really easy with my fingernail. And another drawback is this cures with UV light. So I just printed this. I cured it for 10 minutes in that. But if I leave this out on the shelf or outside in the sun, it's going to continue to cure for the rest of its life. And eventually it's going to get really hard and really brittle, and it can want to crack and fall apart. So you need to protect these after you print them. So people will paint them or they'll clear coat them, and that can protect against UV light, and it can help it with scratches. And I tried several different clear coats. I tried gloss clear, semi-gloss, satin clear, and this is what I was the most happy with. It's satin clear, Rust-Oleum, and somewhere on the bottom, non-yellowing, UV resistant. So that's what I found had the best finish. But you can see the different things right here: gloss, semi-gloss, satin. And then probably the most challenging thing to tackle with the resin was color. So they don't have a lot of color options. You can see I tried several different blues, and some of the colors, or a lot of them, are more translucent than like a solid color. So this is one of the blues. This is kind of see-through. This one obviously didn't work, but it cost me $50 for a jug of resin to find out that, yeah, I can't use this, but I'll use it for other stuff. So it's expensive, and I couldn't find a blue that I was happy with. So then I had to get into resin dye. So this is a bunch of dye, and this is the resin that I'm using. It's Hacker Matters Blue, Model Blue. And it is blue, and it looks blue in this photo and in person. But when you stick it next to a different blue, you can see it's more of like a darker green. It's like a more sea foamy. So it's not the right shade of blue. And I experimented by adding some of the Pro Series white to it to lighten it up a little, and then some different resin dye. I've got light blue, and it was actually purple. Adding purple to it made it more blue and took away the green, so I had to look at a color chart. So a bunch of experimentation there until I found a mixture that I was happy with. And you can see, if we look here, right here, these are kind of the three colors that we're dealing with. This is the old filament that I would use. It was a little darker. This is the OEM STI blue. This is a piece that I cut off the key. And then this is the blue mixture that I came up with that's got the satin clear on it. So this is a little too dark. This isn't quite perfect, but this I think is closer to the OEM than this was. But they all look good in person. When you don't see this next to the other colors, you would never know it's not the right blue. So figuring out the color is probably the hardest part of this. And I would get frustrated. I'd buy some resin, I'd try it, it wasn't right. And I'd kind of give up on it for like a month, and then I'd circle back to it. But you can see I've got a bunch of key covers here that I've printed with this new color formula, and kind of the process goes like this. I'll take one of these raw prints, and I'll come over here and I'll sand the bottom of it, because these are suspended. You can kind of see all the little dots there. Those are where supports were. You can't print this right on the build plate because it adheres really well. If you tried to snap it off, it could want to break, or it could want to mushroom the bottom a little. So you use supports. So I lightly sand it to get rid of the supports. I will test fit it on a key to make sure that I'm happy with it. And then this is where I thought I was going to save a lot of sanding. I would just go ahead and clear it. And it does look pretty decent cleared. This is a raw one that's been cleared. This is with gloss. It's not with the satin finish. But I went ahead and I sanded them anyways, because if you look right at the top, you can kind of see, if I get this to focus, you can kind of see the lines at 0.5 millimeter or 0.05 millimeter Z height on it. So the lines are pretty faint, but you can sand those smooth, and there are some kind of print lines on the side. You can sand that finish smooth, and then you can hit it with a satin clear, and it'll look like this. You've got a nice smooth finish. You don't have those lines on the top, and it just looks a lot better doing that. So I think I still am going to sand them, which was something I wanted to get away from, but it makes them look a lot better. So I'm going to have to do it. But at least this way, every one that I print on the resin printer, I know if I sand it and clear it, it'll be salvageable. It's not like the ABS ones where 4 out of 10 I could use, and then 6 out of 10 were kind of a waste of time. So that's a big reason for going over to the resin prints. And then when you put them on, it's kind of the same process. I did have to adjust the dimensions slightly. The ABS ones, when I would print those, some of the material would get sanded off, and then some of it would get lost in the acetone bath. So obviously, like, I had to make them a little wider, a little longer, I guess. But that was pretty minor. And then one other thing that I changed a little, as you can see, this is a test one where I kind of cut open. I cut it on both sides. This is the solid part. So with resin, it cures and hardens, but if you have something that's too thick, the inside of it can actually still be liquid. That's why when you see a lot of big resin prints, like big models, they'll be hollow. They'll have a drain hole in the bottom. And the purpose for that drain hole is to be able to wash the inside out, and then to be able to put a mini UV light up in the hole to cure the inside. So if it gets too thick, you can have liquid resin in them, which isn't good. So this is the thickest part of the key, and I cut it open, and there's no liquid resin here. It cures all the way through, which is good. And then over here, you can see that 4D62 chip slid up in there. And if you looked through one of these, if you look over on the right, you can kind of see some light that's shining through. So this filament is a little translucent if it gets too thin, but these are printed with kind of thick sidewalls, so you can't see through them. It makes a good light blockage except for that little corner. It's the thin area of the resin. You can see that little bit of light. And I didn't know how thick was that. Was it super thin? Was it super thick? So that's what it looks like. It is a little thinner, but it's still pretty thick. So what I did is I realized that I can take this chip and I can bend it down a little and I can make that corner thicker so you don't really see that light. It wasn't real noticeable with the chip in there, and now it's not noticeable at all, but that's kind of the minor difference that I had to make to this. So I'm happy with the way that it came out. I'm going to be moving to these going forward. I'm not sure on pricing yet. I'd imagine the raw ones may be a little cheaper just because I can make them faster. And I'll probably give some kind of discount to people that purchase the old covers if they want to move up or buy the new ones. I'll give them some kind of discount. I'm not sure what it'll be right now because I did have to sand the old ones and I will have to sand the new ones. But they'll get something off if someone wants to buy more. So that's it. Let me know if you have any questions or are interested. I will be doing other colors eventually, maybe black and gray, but I haven't fully developed those. I need to buy some more resin. I'm going to use the same Pro Series Hacker Matters that I used here. It works really well. This stuff is another brand that you see right there. But I'll probably be doing black. I don't know if I'll do gray, maybe. Gray doesn't look that bad. So that's it.